Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're a physician who's just exhausted from fighting tooth and nail to protect your practice's margins, or maybe you're a software investor hunting for that next massive infrastructure play, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're completely deconstructing the healthcare billing ecosystem. It's massive, it's incredibly inefficient, and honestly, we're not just going to look at the symptoms here, we're breaking down a major structural paradigm shift. We are talking about moving this entire industry away from a reactive downstream correction process to a proactive upstream intelligence layer. Let's get into it.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start off with the healthcare billing crisis, unpack what we call structural uncertainty, and evaluate exactly why current solutions are failing. Then we'll introduce clinical-to-claims intelligence, walk through how the platform actually works, and wrap up with the market impact and vision.
All right, Section 1, the healthcare billing crisis. Let's take a hard look at why the current approach to revenue cycle management is just fundamentally flawed.
Think about this quote for a second. Healthcare doesn't have a billing problem, it has a translation problem. If you run a clinical practice, you literally live this reality every single day, right? You document the care perfectly, but then you still end up spending endless hours just chasing down the payment. Why is that? Well, it's because clinical reality is a messy, highly nuanced narrative. But a claim is strict, structured machine code. So what happens clinically gets completely distorted when it's translated into claims, and that gap, that is exactly where the whole system just breaks down.
And honestly, you just have to look at the sheer scale of the fallout here. Over $100 billion. Let that sink in. That is the size of the revenue cycle management, or RCM industry. For the investors tuning in, I want you to realize that this entire ecosystem, the coding services, the denial management software, the armies of human QA, it's effectively just a correction layer economy. It literally exists for one single reason, to fix upstream noise, all because that initial data input is unstructured and ambiguous.
Moving on to Section 2, unpacking structural uncertainty. Let's really dig into the root cause of this massive industry inefficiency.
Okay, so the absolute foundational concept we need to grasp here is structural uncertainty. By definition, this is the unpredictable gap and the interpretation variance between a physician's actual clinical intent and the final structured claims data. Because remember, every single claim is a translation. A physician dictates a note, right? Then a coder interprets that note. Then the software system formats it. And finally, the payer reinterprets it all over again. Every single layer of human interpretation just injects more and more variance into the mix. And in the world of healthcare billing, ambiguity straight up equals denied claims and delayed revenue.
But we do need to take a step back and establish a really hard truth here about what software simply cannot fix: uncontrollable payer realities. You can have absolutely flawless clinical documentation, and guess what? A claim will still get denied. Why? Well, things like DFR disputes, that's Division of Financial Responsibility, where it's totally unclear if the medical group or the health plan is supposed to pay. Or maybe the patient switched insurance. Or out of nowhere, you get hit with a random medical record audit request. These are non-deterministic payer behaviors. AI is incredibly powerful, but it's not going to magically eliminate all accounts receivable denials simply because payer behavior is often a systemic reality, not just a coding error.
Okay, Section 3, why current solutions fail. Let's talk about why most downstream billing software out there right now is just completely missing the mark. So traditional RCM is inherently downstream, interpretive, and wildly reactive. It essentially waits for a messy clinical note, sends it off to a coder, submits it, gets a denial, and then frantically tries to fix it. It fundamentally assumes the data is going to be broken from the start. But this new AI approach, its upstream, is deterministic and it is proactive. Instead of fighting the payer on a claim that's already been denied, it standardizes the clinical-to-claim transformation at the very source. It stops broken claims from ever being created in the first place. It's a total game changer.
That brings us to Section 4, clinical-to-claims intelligence. This is where the structural paradigm shift actually happens.
And the core philosophy here is this. We are not just optimizing the revenue cycle, we are completely eliminating the ambiguity that makes it necessary in the first place. Think about that. The goal isn't just to build a faster billing tool so we can keep playing the same old, broken game. No, the goal is to convert clinical intent into pure, payer-compliant, audit-proof data before it ever even leaves the provider's office. You take the human interpretation out and you make it completely deterministic right at the point of care.
Let's get a bit technical in Section 5, how the platform works. I want to break down the actual architectural SaaS stack for the investors and the practice owners watching.
All right, so here is the three-layer architecture that actually makes all of this possible. Layer 1, AI Clinical Capture. This takes ambient voice and turns it into a perfectly structured note, prompting the physician in real time. Super seamless. Layer 2, the MDM Reasoning Engine. Now, since CMS rules heavily base coding on medical decision-making these days, this engine instantly infers the correct CPT codes, ICD codes, and the precise level of service directly from that note. And finally, Layer 3, the Claim Compiler. This is the heavy technical lift. It translates all that structured data into strict 5010 and X12 EDI formats. It's essentially taking that clinical narrative and mapping it flawlessly into the strict 83 loops that clearinghouses require.
But here's the absolute kicker. Crucially, before anything is actually sent off, we have the pre-submission validation layer. You can kind of think of this as pre-clearinghouse intelligence. It's doing a ton of heavy lifting. It validates that your CPT codes perfectly align with the documented medical decision-making. It rigorously checks for any truncated diagnoses. It detects eligibility logic super early, and it even flags those tricky DOFR risk patterns we talked about earlier. It's literally simulating payer rules before submission, practically guaranteeing that the claims are structurally sound.
Wrapping things up with Section 6, Market Impact and Vision. Let's look at why this paradigm shift matters so much to both sides of the table.
Because the impact here really is dual-sided. For the physicians tuning in, your core benefit is finally stripping away all that administrative friction and those incredibly frustrating avoidable denials. And the strategic impact? Well, you get your cash a whole lot faster with way less headache, which translates directly to higher margins and compressed revenue cycles. Now, for the investors, the core benefit is backing a truly scalable software infrastructure layer, rather than some service-heavy RCM business that requires an army of humans. The strategic outcome for you is a high-margin SaaS model brilliantly protected by a compounding data moat. Because remember, this system gets smarter and sharper with every single patient encounter.
So all of this really leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. If we successfully eliminate ambiguity to make healthcare billing deterministic right at the source, are we simply just improving workflows? Or are we actually making traditional revenue cycle management, as we know it today, completely obsolete? I'd argue that the shift from a reactive correction layer to a proactive intelligence layer truly changes everything. Thanks so much for joining me on This Explainer today. Keep looking upstream, and I will catch you all next time.